Welcome to the Radiant Life podcast. I am your host, Tatiana, and I am a master mindset coach, and I'm obsessed with empowering you to live and create your best life possible. If you're looking to uplevel your mindset, life, happiness, and success, then you are in the right place. My goal with this podcast is to help you see the potential within yourself, to be able to break the limiting beliefs and habits that are holding you back, and to help you feel inspired to get clear with who you are in order to create the life you desire. Thank you so much for listening. Now let's get into today's episode. Hello, loves, and welcome to the Radiant Life podcast. I am so excited that you're here and listening and to get this episode out to you because there is so much valuable information that I think the whole world needs to hear. Today's episode, I got the privilege to interview Xavi D, who is a master communication coach. And he shares not only his story of how he became a better communicator in his life, but he gives so many tips and insights on how you can become more aware of yourself to then better communicate with those in your life. Because let's be real, you guys, communication is probably the number one key in life on being successful and being happy and fulfilled, whether that's with your relationships, your boss, your family, your friends. We need to communicate, right? And he really shares how we can tap into that and express our desires and needs in a respectful, loving way. It is so powerful. We also both share some insights and some of our stories, hoping it helps you as well. So I'm just going to let you get into it. I hope you enjoy. If this episode touches you, if you gain value from it, please share it with someone else. And let's get into today's episode. Enjoy. All right. Hello, and welcome back to the Radiant Life podcast. Today's episode, I am getting to interview Xavi, who is a master communication coach. And we met in person a little over, almost a year ago to like the week, right? At the retreat.
I would imagine almost to the week, which is pretty wild.
That is so crazy.
That's nuts. I love it.
Yeah. So Xavi and I were in the same business mentorship program, and you've grown a lot. And I'm having him on here to share his story, help you guys learn a little bit more on communication skills, the importance of it, and who knows where this conversation will take us. So welcome. I'm so happy to have you on the podcast.
Tati, thank you for having me. I'm super, super stoked to dive in. And it's been a season of growth, to say the least. So I had to dive into what that represents and, of course, how that all relates.
Yes, I would love for you to share. We both just moved. So we're like in new environments, new households, and it's fun, but it's a little hectic. So I feel that.
For sure.
So let's start with just sharing with the listeners, like who you are, what you do, and how you got to here doing what you're doing now.
Yeah, 100%. So as Tati affectionately introduced me, I'm Xavi D. I'm, self-proclaimed Stoke Lord and communication coach. I coach stoked entrepreneurs in the art of masterful communication to create clarity in their personal and professional endeavors. And that is an extension of my journey, having been surrounded with incredibly dysfunctional communication dynamics, violent communication dynamics, growing up in some very interesting household situations myself. And the end result of that is communication coaching and the lessons I learned from that journey.
Yeah, I love that. I think communication is key to every relationship, whether it's like intimate, boss, like if we don't communicate properly, like we're getting nowhere. And I can personally say I in my past did not have the best communication skills either. And I used a lot of emotion. So I'm excited to dive in. So did you know that this is what you wanted to do from the get-go, or kind of like, how did you transition into realizing like, this is my purpose to help others communicate better?
I would say absolutely. I did not know from the beginning that this was what I was meant to do. Nor did I know that this was a skill I had, which is really interesting to consider. I started the journey as an entrepreneur, and I got into personal development and growth when I was 14. And the etiology of that journey was indeed entrepreneurship and starting your own businesses. And I didn't truly start my own business until I dropped out of college and I moved back home to San Francisco. That was truly when everything I had done from a personal growth standpoint started to manifest tangibly. And the irony of that is that it wasn't until I started to work with clients, and this was from a personal training and holistic lifestyle coaching point of view, that I realized I had a gift for communicating. And it wasn't until I started posting on social media and sharing my truths, et cetera, that people, started to give me those compliments and illuminated an underlying skill I didn't know I had. So kind of ironic that a lot of gifts that you have, you don't really realize or reckon until you're reflected that gift back from somebody else, or they give you a compliment and say, hey, you could really do this in a major way. But yeah, communication coaching took a while to get to, and it involved quite a few years of holistic health coaching, which I still do. I would say that when you bring it full circle, it's one of those funny things where you don't have any concept of how it's going to turn out. You just know that you need to do it. And here we are.
Yeah, I love that. It's like trusting yourself and knowing that we will never know the final destination. There is no final destination. We're constantly growing and evolving our gifts and our skills every day. And it's kind of similar, like me, I didn't, I started as a health coach. Now I do life and mindset coaching, right? I didn't think I would do that back in my engineering days. So you said you dropped out of college, and because I know that this is a topic that a lot of people consider or they fear, like, how did you make that decision and overcome that? I assumed there was a fear, excuse me. How did you make that decision and trust yourself into, starting your own business and following more of like what maybe your intuition or heart was telling you?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. The semester prior to dropping out, I was incredibly depressed. I was in a living situation that could not have been more dysfunctional. First of all, freshman year, we partied the whole time. So we hardly went to class. Our GPAs were dog shit, which meant that the best living situation we could acquire for our sophomore year was a quad. So it was worse than our freshman housing.
Oh, no.
It was really, really gnarly. And unfortunately, because we didn't have the best living situation, and one of our friends with whom we were meant to live dropped out of school, that, I guess you could say, the summer before sophomore year, we acquired a roommate that was previously kicked out of, I don't know how to say this. He was kicked out of a previous living situation with which we were involved. And he just happened to be a straggler that got thrown in.
That's funny.
Which, neither here nor there. So it was a pretty shitty situation. There's a lot of drug use. There's a lot of partying. And again, not very much community, growth, expansion. And I felt really depressed. I didn't sleep. Lights were always on. It was really gnarly. So kind of towards the end of that semester, I was texting my dad. I was working at a coffee shop in Cambridge. I was texting my dad. I was, kind of like morbid stuff. Like, I don't want to be here anymore. I hate this. And he was really concerned for me. So I came home for winter break, smoked a lot of pot, as I usually did at that time, and begged him to stay and not go back to school. But I ended up going back to school. And within a couple of weeks, he said, Xavi, you're coming home. And at the time, I was like, no, Dad, I'm really going to double down. I'm going to commit myself to this. It's going to work out. He was like, you're coming home. So in a way, it wasn't my choice. And so I came back home, and when you're 19, yes, you're an adult, but at the same time, you're not. So came back home. The only skill I had was being a barista. So I was like, well, fuck it. I'll just be a barista. I worked at some really cool coffee shops in San Francisco, and realizing how much that sucked, I said, cool, well, I guess it's time to figure out a different path. And I would say that's the origin story of entrepreneurship. Is like, everything else sucks. So I better find out something to do with myself.
Yeah. I just love that you touched on that. And I love sharing that, because I know for me, when I was in college, like I was going through what you went through, and I was like, I hate my life and everything. And I just want the listeners hearing, like, if you are not feeling excited about what you're doing or passionate or what you're studying, whether you're in school, you do not need to do that. You don't. And it's okay to switch majors. It's okay to drop out of school. It's okay to change jobs and careers. Like it is okay because you're just finding out what you don't like. And you're just one step closer to getting on path to who you are and your purpose. So I just wanted to share that because I know a lot of people struggle with those same thoughts and emotions. And
Yeah.
I'm so glad that you were in school in Massachusetts because you know where I'm from. You
Yeah.
feel and I remember, so bringing it back into communication, I remember the first time that you were on our mentorship call, and I was like, the way this man speaks is so like articulate. And I was just like so intrigued. And I know you weren't really doing communication coaching at the time. So I do love how it does come first circle and you're really owning and embracing, like, no, this is what I'm good at, and this is where I can help people with. Um, but you mentioned earlier that, you grew up you just grew up in a way of just having poor communication skills, excuse me. When was the turning point of when you started to become a better, more clear communicator?
Great question. I should clarify one thing with that.
Yeah.
Both of my parents are exceptional communicators, but are also incredibly dysfunctional at the same time. And that dysfunction arises when emotion is involved.
Mm.
Both of my parents are incredibly articulate and well-spoken, well-read, cultured, if you will, even though I think that's kind of, it doesn't make you a good communicator necessarily. But I noticed the biggest gap in communication was emotional communication, or communicating how you're feeling.
Mm.
With my dad, we basically spent my whole childhood yelling at each other, and not like, I'm really mad at you, really mean, nasty, fucked up shit that I would say and he would say that no parent or no child should ever say to each other.
Mm-hmm.
But really, really, really fucked up shit. My sister is also bipolar and borderline, so there's no filter to her emotional communication. So I thought my dad and I were bad. Imagine being in a household where there is absolutely no filter to what you have to share. And everything is triggering and upsetting, and there's fury, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's intense, and it's very, very challenging to be around. And as a result of that, I saw a huge gap. And so in the process of starting at 14, personal growth and development gave me an outlet to do the emotional work that allowed me to communicate with greater grace. It wasn't really until I was about 21, 22 that I learned to do that succinctly. I learned to do it with my parents to address all of our shit, which is, hey, instead of you're really distant and I hate you for that, I feel deeply abandoned. And I feel like the way that you treated me reflected that you didn't care about me. That's a big difference. Or, this is something my dad and I have chatted about many times, but while you claim to love me unconditionally, the way that you treat me isn't commensurate with that. And that leaves me feeling a lack of trust and safety in our bond. That's very different than fuck you, I hate you, right?
Yeah, it's so much more deeper, more effective.
Right, getting to the point. So I should preface all of communication work with saying it's not easy, and it can be incredibly challenging to speak your truth and be honest. But after a certain point of time, my mentor says, the deeper you go on the path, the deeper the meaning of life becomes. The deeper you go into communication, the deeper truths you speak. And that's hard. It's not easy.
Yeah, it is not easy. I really relate, to your childhood. I would lash out as well, and my emotions would make me say the most cruelest things, and it's sad. Where we're not taught to express our emotions as children, we're not, right? So you got into personal development at 14. That's a very young age. I didn't even know what personal development was at 14. Who introduced you to that? How did you get into it?
Yeah. Really fun story. Again, a period of depression and sadness in my life. I was morbidly obese. I just quit playing baseball, which was my true first love. I wanted to be a professional baseball player more than anything. And I quit playing baseball, and I felt this release of pressure, but I also felt completely absent of purpose, and apathetic. So my dad and I were in New York. My dad is an antique dealer. He has a pretty extensive background with connections all around the world. And early on in my childhood, he had befriended a guy named Michael Bruno, who founded a company called First Dibs, which is kind of like the premier purveyor of antiques and fine art online. And Michael Bruno is incredibly successful, beyond successful. And we had dinner with Michael because every time we were in New York, that happened. And so that night, Michael introduced me to the book Think and Grow Rich, which was the etiology of his success and his journey. And he was actually featured in the Think and Grow Rich movie that came out a couple of years ago. But wow. His story is pretty profound. He's like, he basically read the book when he was about 19 and began his journey of entrepreneurship, got into realty, was one of the most successful realtors in the Bay Area, and then started his journey with fine arts and antiques, founded First Dibs, and then sold out to a venture capital firm some 10 years later for hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. So very cool. Absolutely crushed it. But Michael is a very inspiring individual and also very well articulated. Introduced me to the concepts of the book and basically said, you can do absolutely anything you want, so long as your thoughts and actions align with that, right? So that began my journey. And it was like, well, shit, I guess I can do a lot of things here.
Yeah, for sure. That's so powerful when you become aware. And that's why we're coaches, because we became aware, at some point too, of like, we create our reality through our words, our actions, and our thoughts. And oh, that's powerful. I wish I knew that at 14. It took me a little bit longer, but we're here now. And if those of you listening, I hope that read that book, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. It's phenomenal. So such a great book. I love his book, Outwitting the Devil. I don't know if you read that one.
Not yet, but there are a few of his that I need to read.
Yeah, listen to that one. Everybody, like, hands down, listen to Outwitting the Devil. It's powerful, but cool. Well, I love that. So I'm interested when you work with clients, how do I word this? How can someone know if they're actually being a good communicator or not? And I say this because, like, there's moments where I just realized in my own life that I believe I am a good communicator to an extent, but there are some people or situations where I'm not, and I maybe get timid with speaking the truth, right? So, like, is there any signs? Is there anything that you can share that can bring awareness to people, like, oh, maybe I'm not actually an effective communicator and maybe I should work on this? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think there's this great idiom that's relevant. If you ever find yourself questioning, am I a narcissist? You're not a narcissist. Likewise, if you ever find yourself questioning, am I a good communicator? You're probably a pretty decent communicator. People who are not never ask the question. So if you're listening to this podcast and you go, am I a good communicator? You're probably pretty decent and have some work to do, as we all do, but you're not terrible.
I love that.
If you're super defiant and you hear this and you say, I'm a great communicator, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Probably a good time to reflect and maybe go, I think I have a lot of shit to work on here.
That was a good thing for me. I forget what I was thinking the other day, and I'm like, oh my God, am I like this? But you just helped me calm that down. But so what would you say are, like, practical tips for those who want to begin working on just being more effectively communicators in their lives? Like, are there tips? Are there, like, a couple things that people can start implementing today to be able to know that they're actually communicating effectively with those around them and speaking in a way that others can understand what they're trying to say?
Yeah, this is a really hard question for me to answer because it came so naturally to me. But there are a few things to consider. One, when you begin to communicate, it is so important to pause, consider the emotional background of what you're speaking from, and then proceed. So if you are triggered, angry, upset, identify the emotion first. I'm feeling angry. Cool. Explore that narrative. What does it mean to you to be angry? What are you angry about? As you do that, you'll often find that there are many layers to anger. If you've read the book Power versus Force, or you're familiar with, like, David Hawkins' works, there are different levels of consciousness. And anger is above sadness, guilt, shame, etc. Usually any emotion that you're feeling, called secondary emotions, are related to primary emotions. Those primary emotions in my mind are shame, guilt, and fear. So if you're feeling angry, upset, frustrated, it's likely an extension of this root of feeling ashamed, guilty, or afraid of something. That's a good place to start. Secondly, once you're familiar with that process and you take more time to do it within yourself, before you even start speaking it to somebody else, be able to track in your mind and lay out the path by which those emotions occur. Okay, cool. I'm feeling really, really jealous of a dude that I see at the gym who's way stronger and way physically bigger than me. Cool. Jealousy. How does that make me feel? It makes me feel inadequate. Cool. I feel inadequate because I'm smaller. What's the, kind of the deeper layer of inadequacy, or where does that inadequacy come from? It comes from the shame, guilt, and fear that I have around feeling that I'm not my best. Cool. I'm familiar with that. Great. What's the deeper truth beneath that? If I really sit with that, I would probably say that I'm afraid of acknowledging my worth. Cool. Am I jealous of the dude who has huge biceps and veins? No, I'm afraid of acknowledging my worth. When you converse with somebody and you take that into a conversation, step 3 would be, hey, nice to meet you, dude. Can I share something? Sure. I'm really jealous of how big you are. Okay. Weird, but I don't know. All right, whatever. Can I tell you why? Yeah, sure. Why? Because I feel incredibly insecure and afraid of acknowledging my own worth and how fit I've been. For me, it's like how fit I've become. Cool. I don't know why you're telling me that, but thanks. Cool. Yeah, you bet. Now translate that to an intimate relationship, or translate that to a business relationship. That's when the emotional exploration of communication starts, is when you can start communicating that track of, this is the emotion, this is the root.
That is so powerful. I love the example, because we easily can get jealous of other people or just anything. We feel an emotion and we think a thought, but really that's not actually the root, the actual issue. Most of it is everyone blames everybody else and points the finger, when really there's 3 pointing right back at us. And it's what we're meant to look for and be like, okay, what's actually going on within me? What do I feel? What do I think? But the way you just effectively communicated that's powerful. It's funny because in a book I'm reading, the 4th sequel to the Celestine Prophecy, they're actually mentioning, we will all be at a more conscious level and we can all consciously communicate with everyone, right? And that's just speaking your truth and just saying what you have to say instead of lying or fibbing or just, so pretty much what you just said, like going up to that guy and being like, hey, you make me feel like this, and this is because of that. Like, you're just being your so true, authentic self. Like that's hard to do, right? So how would, sorry, did you want to add something?
No, just agreeing.
How would you, like, that's scary. It's scary to speak our truth in emotional situations to people. Like, how do you recommend us speaking our truth in intense situations like that? Or maybe that's not intense, but when we are in an intense situation, or any situation really.
Yeah, that's a great question. First is reps. You got to get it in. Somehow you have to start somewhere. And the place to start is with yourself. Having an inner dialogue doesn't make you a psychopath. It makes you incredibly aware. Or said in another way, to be crazy in an insane world is the highest compliment, right? To communicate with yourself in a world where nobody communicates with themselves is a sign of maturity, not a sign of illness, as it were. So talking to yourself out loud, speaking to yourself, listening to the inner narrative. My thing is, you may know this having been on the retreat, or you can ask Lisha. She's very familiar with this. I put a pillow over my head and I just sit there and I feel and I think and I let things come in. I get familiar with them. Cool. Take the next step. So starting with yourself is super important. And it's primarily the thing that we're afraid of. We're afraid of ourselves. We're not afraid of other people. Once we're comfortable with that, cool. I've confronted that demon. I've confronted that thing that's within me, that challenge or that obstacle. Cool. What's the next step? try speaking it out loud. Try speaking it out loud to yourself as if you're standing in the mirror and the person you see there was somebody else. Cool. Step 2. Step 3, try it with a real person. And that's where it gets really, really scary for a lot of people. But the invitation here is that you're not really afraid of how somebody's going to react. You're afraid of the power you have within you. The power that is so strong, the power that is so deep that if you were to be rejected, unacknowledged, pushed away, you'd still be whole. Ooh. And that's something I deal with every day. I'm not saying this because I'm perfect. It's something that I literally die unto every day because it's the deepest truth I know, the deepest truth there is. That's kind of the overall theme as I just described. And then that 3-step process is where I start.
I love that. That is so powerful. And it just brings me back flashbacks. I used to do mirror exercises and I want to do them now just with the chapter I'm in, because I think that when you can see yourself and speak to yourself in the mirror is when you can accept yourself a little bit more and accept the truths or the emotions that are within you, right?
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
Oh, no. Yeah. Like, and then, I mean, this is what I'm assuming you help. I mean, I help women too, like be able to find their voice and accept it to then speak it so they can embrace their radiance, hint, hint, but like really embracing who they are and not being affected if, others reject them or think they're crazy because they're so whole within themselves. And I just think that 3-step exercise is really powerful. And it was a great confirmation for me that I'm not crazy for talking to myself all day, every day, because you're calling me more aware. So I'm happy that you just said
yeah,
that.
Right.
Sometimes I'm like, oh my God.
We totally get freaked out by it because it's so abnormal, right? And typically we don't have functional role models to show us this behavior. Mm-hmm. We typically grow up in households where silence is a virtue, or silence is a form of communication, or the standard. Or sometimes as the opposite. For me, it was a combination of silence and violence, and not necessarily physical, but certainly communicatively violent, or violent communication was the standard. And if that's the case, you probably have a pretty conflicted heart around safety. What's safe? Usually your family of origin and their value system. And if that's safe, it's a lot harder to discover something on your own, which is why anybody who's in the process of creating family, raising a family, working on themselves in an intimate relationship has the task of working out these dynamics in the name of greater harmony. Otherwise, whatever you pass on, whether it's through friends or children, that standard is going to be the way that other people communicate with you, or your children communicate in the world. Ooh. And if you can't address that, then you have generational trauma and dysfunction that repeats.
Yes. I tell all my clients, I say, I swear our generation is here to heal generational trauma, because I believe all of us are waking up. We're becoming more consciously aware. And I believe, like you said, we're breaking the patterns of our parents and society and so on and so forth. But do you find, working with clients or speaking with people, that there is a trend or just like what's it called, a common denominator around those that, can communicate? I don't want to say better or not, but like, I don't know if that makes sense. Like, do you find women have more trouble or they are better communicators? Or I don't know if that makes sense. I don't even know what I'm asking. Do you get what I'm saying though? Just to see, like, do you notice that, or is it just completely everybody is different?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I want to table that for just a sec and finish one thought that I had around that generational trauma as a segue.
Yeah, of course.
What I just bookmarked. There's a quote by a gay, maybe he's gay, who knows, by a guy named, I believe his name is Terry Rawl, and he's a psychotherapist. And I heard him on the Peter Attia podcast, which is primarily like functional medicine and health. But he was speaking about generational trauma, and his dad was really abusive. And he says generational trauma proceeds from generation to generation like a forest fire. And until the brave individual rises from the flames with the courage to face the flames, that generational trauma will repeat from person to person at infinitum. And I
It's giving me
thought
goosebumps.
it's really fucking powerful. And the caveat to that, or maybe the silver lining, is that we forget that the gifts that our family of origin and our ancestors share with us are the key to facing the flames. So if it wasn't for my parents' communication or emotional intelligence or the pain and the trauma that I experienced, I would never have had the chance to face the flames.
Wow. That was really powerful. And I just want to add before you go into the next segue is that if you're working on healing, bettering yourself, if you're listening to this, I know you probably are. I know it's hard. And I know you may have thoughts of like, is this worth it? Like, what am I doing? Like, I'm going against the norm, or my parents, like, just like he said, keep going, because you're healing the generational trauma for your family to come. And you heal it from the past as well. I believe when you heal it now, you heal it from your parents or grandparents and your children and future grandchildren. And just to give yourself kindness and props, because doing this work is not easy, and it is hard and it is heavy, and to always just make sure you have a community and support, because you're never alone. And yeah, it's hard. So I just wanted to add that in.
Yeah, please. And I think a lot of us try to do it alone, and that is the number one mistake you can make. And what I'll segue to, which is, the patterns I see with different people and the way they communicate, is trying to do it alone. We can say male or female. That's one of the biggest things that we try, because there's this badge of, again, the shame and guilt, right? The shame and guilt of, if I'm responsible for the trauma, therefore I'm the only one who can solve it. And that's not true. Without a support network, a coach, a mentor, somebody to help you, I certainly wouldn't be here. Yes, my family was helpful, but without my mentors, Paul Check, Jator Pierre, Jason Ganzuk, I wouldn't have the opportunity to be here or be able to communicate this. So thanks, Tati, for that.
No, I love that. And I wanted to just add, because I've had this conversation with people and clients before. When we talk about trauma, there's different levels of trauma. We all have trauma, right? A parent's divorce is traumatic. That's trauma, and so on and so forth. They're not hearing the words "I love you" from your parents. Like that plays a big role in who you are today. And when you're doing the work of healing, or digging deep or breaking the patterns, I just want to let you know that it's not you saying your parents were wrong, or they were bad parents, or they fucked up, or like they're bad people. No, like you're just healing because they did the best that they could with what they had. And maybe they didn't do exactly what they wanted, or it hurt you in a way that they have no idea. So don't allow healing trauma or overcoming all of these, obstacles. Don't, how do I say that? Like, don't think that that's going to like insult your parents if you have a great relationship with them by doing that work and healing it. Because does that make sense? Does that make sense to you, Xavi?
Yeah, absolutely. I think maybe a layer that you're referring to is one of the greatest fears is we have the sense of abandoning other people if we progress. And subconsciously that's registered as I'm repeating the trauma, because a lot of this is abandonment wounds, right? So somebody might have been physically present for you. It doesn't mean that they're emotionally present. So if we say, I'm going to progress now, look at this and step into a new way of being, well, guess what? Subconsciously we think I'm abandoning the people that I love. And that's not necessarily true. It may be the greatest act of love that you ever step into.
Oh yeah, but being able to heal and better yourself, you inspire others to do that work themselves, right? And I for sure know that with my friends and my parents. Doing the work I did has opened their eyes into what they could heal and work on themselves. So I love that. Yeah, you're not abandoning, yeah, I love that. So when you bring it back to the 3 steps that you brought up, and like say people are now better effectively communicating, maybe some others aren't, when they're communicating, aren't receptive, or they're kind of crossing a line, or like, what would you say, how is a good way to like respect these boundaries, or having healthy boundaries and limits when it comes to these communication, because like communicating with other people?
Yeah, I think one of the policies that Liz and I use really well is that when either one of us becomes disrespectful or rude, we pause.
Mm.
You have a choice in that moment to escalate the tension or de-escalate the situation. When you do not properly implement those techniques, you will almost always devolve back to those core emotions of shame and guilt. And you cannot, the irony is you cannot communicate these things without a higher perspective.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot communicate shame and guilt without some degree of anger. You cannot communicate anger without some degree of empathy. And if you devolve back to the shame and guilt, you're just going to exacerbate the same root causes that are causing the tension in the first place.
That disconnect. Yeah, that disconnect, right?
For
So
sure.
you bring up Lissa a lot, and I just want to share with listeners. This is Lissa, who I've also met from our amazing business mentorship. Who, oh, you guys, are love story is so cute. Oh my goodness, they met at the retreat in person, and they just like fell in love since then. And I love Lissa. Oh, yeah, you guys are amazing. So I know a lot of listeners are in relationships, or they desire relationships, and maybe their previous ones did not have great communication. Do you have any like go-to habits or tips that you and Lissa have implemented in your relationship outside of the pause one, to just build a better communication and a stronger relationship overall?
Yeah, this is really interesting. And I appreciate you bringing that out. Shout out to Liz Scotty.
Yeah.
One of the things that we do very well is when there's tension, we don't try to necessarily communicate the resolution, but we communicate the tension. So one of the barriers to communication is we think, shit, I have to come up with something like really well spoken or really synthesized before there can be resolution or conversation. And we're just afraid to point out the elephant in the room. So one of those communication keys is, hey, there's a lot of tension between us today. Or, hey, I'm feeling really angry right now. Okay, cool. Likewise, I'm feeling really excited. Because this doesn't only apply to negative emotions, it applies to positive emotions well. And typically speaking, we have the same dysfunction with positive emotions as we do negative emotions. So listen, I first and foremost, we pause, we name the tension or we name the root if we can, not always. Secondly, this is something that I'm working on, and Les has taught me a lot about time and place. An impeccable sense of timing makes you a great communicator. There's a time and a place for a deep conversation and a time and a place to say, hey, can we chat about this later? My standard coming into the relationship is we talk about everything openly all the time.
Yeah.
Her standard was we don't say anything. We just wait. And if it's not nagging us in a couple of days, then we don't say anything. Cool. There's a lot of balance there because when we first moved in together, we were in Chattanooga. I was like, well, let's have this conversation in the middle of the day. She was like, no, I'm working. I was like, yeah, but then we're just going to be awkwardly passive to each other the rest of the day. Can't do that. She's like, we also can't interrupt the flow of work. I'm like, well, fuck, which one do you choose? Choose both, right? Cool. I'm feeling like I really need your attention today. Okay, cool. I can't give you to that. I can't give that to you right now. I can later. How's 6:30 p.m.? Sounds great. I'll hold on to my shit until then.
I love that. I love that because I'm like you. If I'm sad or angry, I'm like, we're talking about it now and we're hashing it out. And sometimes I don't give people the heads up. And I just want to add what I was talking to a client today was like the 3 T's when having these conversations, which is, your tonality. Oh, I should have said time was the first one, like scheduling out time, like you just said, like, okay, I can't do it right now. Let's do it later today. Time, tonality, like how your energy with that, like you said, if someone says something really rude, pausing, and turf. I don't know about if you have anything to say on this, but I've realized like maybe not in the bedroom or, you know what I mean? Like you don't want to have a really deep, hard conversation in the bedroom and then you guys go. Like, you know what I mean? Like go on a walk, sit out at a park, go sit out on your porch, go in the kitchen. I don't know. I feel like your location can play a big role. So I just wanted to add those tips as well, because it just kind of flowed with what you just shared.
Beautifully said. Yeah. Timing and place, right? If you can change your emotional state just by changing your posture. You can sure change the tonality and timing of a conversation based on your environment. That's really important. Likewise, maybe one of the cool sleep hacks I came across in my health coaching journey is you don't work in your bed. Your bed is for sex and sleeping.
Yeah.
Your office is for your work. That's key. Otherwise, when you go to sleep, your body registers that as work mode, right?
Yeah. That's actually a habit I never really got into. So I'm so glad I didn't.
Yeah, right. Super good.
Oh no, that was so good. And I just had a thought and I totally just blanked out. Oh no. If it comes to me, it will come. It's not coming. So no, I'm sorry. It's not. You talked about, okay, no, we're just, okay. You know what, God, if you want me to say it, say it. But if not, we're not going to do it. But, oh, I remember. Thank you. I hope you guys are laughing with me. This is how my brain works. But I just want to share, like, these tips are so amazing. And even though I've had insight and Xavi has amazing insight, because this is obviously what he does, don't put the pressure on yourself. Because if I'm being open and honest here, I am a good communicator, and I realized I was neglecting a communication in a specific relationship and friendship of my life. And those 3 T's, I just like really learned this or last week. Like I like finally grasped that, and those 3 T's were able for me to like actually realize this. So I just want to share this because just because we're coaches does not mean we're perfect, does not mean we don't get in arguments with family or friends or relationships. And we're always growing and evolving. And I just want to share that because I just know sometimes when we listen to, experts or people who you look up to, we can put ourselves down, or we can be like, oh my God, I'm not good enough. I'm not as good as they are, XYZ, or they're perfect. Their relationships, they must never fight because they're amazing communicators. That's not the case. We're human. And I really just wanted to add that in there because I know when I hear those I look up to be open and honest like that, like it makes me feel more human and like, okay, we're good. It's okay if I get in a fight with my sister, my mom, or boyfriend, whatever. Right.
Yeah, 100%. Listen, I have at least 1 to 2 moments of disagreement every day, regardless of what mood we're in. And each and every one of those is why we're great. It's not the obstacle. And that's something I've said to her in our communication, to myself, to clients. The things you think are in the way of where you want to be as a communicator or as a coach or as an individual, professional, whatever, are the gateways to where you want to go. And so long as you have a defiant or ignorant relationship to them, you can't recognize the gift they're in. And they will hold you back because you're putting them there as obstacles and not ladders to the next level.
Oh, that was powerful. Yeah, we learn as we go, right? We're meant to learn these lessons. We all learn lessons, you guys. And if we don't learn them, we're going to repeat them. And we all do it. So yeah, just take it as learning and ladders. I love that. And thank you for being honest and sharing that with you. And you guys have very strong personalities. So it happens, you guys. It's normal. We all have different models of the world. We're all raised differently. So it happens. Awesome. I forgot to ask you this in the beginning, but you help stoked entrepreneurs, stoked communication. I'll have you share in a second here where they can find you. But what does stoked mean to you, and how did you find that? How did you? Like where did that come from?
Yeah, so I grew up in California. Like the stoked lifestyle is very much surfing, chilling, having bonfires, eating super fire California burritos. It's very much like it's a way of life. And it really came to be, my buddy turned me onto this podcast, the Chad and JT podcast. And the whole concept is these 2 comedians who basically speak in stoked language. Like, what up, stokers? I'm feeling super bronzed today. And I just felt like the guy over at Erewhon was a total renob. Renob is like their term for like an asshole, which is boner spelled backwards. It's like a total renob. And like, it's super, super, super funny. And so I was like, wow, stoked. The thing about this is, as deep as the truths as I've presented today are powerful and can really change your life. If you don't have a spirit of lightheartedness about this, you will literally succumb to the pressure, as you said, Tati. So if you can find that stoke or that excitement, that passion, and that laid back attitude, which is, hey, it's something I need to work on every day. there's a much higher likelihood you're going to get to where you want to go. And so living a stoked lifestyle is all about enjoying yourself, loving the journey, savoring it. Because the irony, and I'll make this kind of my final point, as it were. The irony is that you can become the greatest communicator, the best entrepreneur, the most empowered individual that you can be. And you will feel exactly the same as when you began.
Oh, damn.
There is no escaping how you feel. So I'm super high flying aspirant of many things. And I'm going to feel exactly the same way when I'm super big, rip, jack, organized, disciplined, stoic, alpha, whatever, as are my current goals, as I will when I felt like I was a little young, broken little boy who's trying to figure out life. I feel exactly the same way. How do you want to be? It's how you want to experience those core emotions you'll never outrun.
I love that. Wow. Thank you so much. You are dropping so many good, like you're helping me. I'm like, this is awesome. I love this. I hope you guys are like, heck yeah, let's just better communicate so we can better the world. So a few questions that I love to ask my guests is, what's the best piece of advice that you've ever been given?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah. It's the best piece of advice I've ever been given. Yeah, this is the title of the book from one of my mentors that I mentioned him. His name is Matt Kahn, and the title is Everything is Here to Help You. Just as a mantra, everything is here to help you. It's a great perspective to encounter all of life's obstacles. And if you read the book, it's fairly spiritual. It talks about angels and cool shit that I'm into. And he says one of the things that's most pertinent to, I guess, this conversation is that each and every emotion is here to help you. Each and every life event is here to help you. And he breaks down each emotion, what it's here to teach you, each life event, what it's here to teach you. It's the most powerful reframe of everything you could experience. And,
What's the book called?
Everything is Here to Help You.
I'm gonna look that up after.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's really cool.
Because we're talking about books. Other than that one, is there any other books or resources that you recommend for those listening right now?
For sure. So in terms of communication, I'm looking at all the books that I have.
I'm sorry, you said Everything is a Resource. Is that the name of the book?
Everything is Here to Help You.
Oh my God, I got confused with my question.
You're good. There's a really great book called 5 Stars by Cameron Gaia, who's a Harvard professor, about communication. It's not necessarily communication techniques, but it's kind of the trajectory of communication. It's the only skill or the only, job title that will never be outsourced. And truly the future of every industry is communication.
Yeah.
It's pretty much the X factor of any business endeavor or any industry. That's a really great read. Oren J. Sofer wrote a book on nonviolent communication. The title, I think, is quite literally Nonviolent Communication. That's really fantastic to discover some techniques to apply. Like I said, everything is here to help you. And then I'm just seeing this one, which I kind of forgot about. Oh, you know what? That's so funny. It is the book by Oren J. Sofer. It's called Say What You Mean.
Oh, cool.
That's really cool. Yeah, but I feel like I have so many to pull from. I would give you those 3 as a great place to start. And oh man, I love just looking over at this bookshelf and like finding gems. The most powerful psychological reframe book I've ever read is called The Courage to Be Disliked.
Ooh, that sounds powerful.
It's unreal.
Cool. I'm like writing these down because I just add up my Amazon shopping list. Come on, who else does that?
Right.
Awesome. And final question is, what are your top success habits that have really helped you be who you are now and live the best life that you're living at the moment?
100%. I learned this at the Czech Institute. I think it's just pertinent to, it's cheesy sometimes, but good Lord, it's helpful. 6 foundation principles. The 3 pillars of Stoic communication are business, relationships, and health. And when it comes to how you show up, if your health is not intact, if you're not taking care of yourself, you honestly have no energy to become a better communicator. So Those 6 foundation principles are moving, thinking, breathing, sleeping, eating. I always forget the 5th one because I like skip over them. Yang principles. There are 3. Yin principles. There are 3. Yin, sleep, nutrition, and hydration. Yang, breathing, thinking, movement. If you can nail those 6 foundation principles and apply them to your life, you have a much better chance of becoming a better communicator.
I love that. Like I say, you can't have a healthy mind without a healthy body. I don't believe in it. So fuel your body properly, move it properly. So I love that you did that. Well, thank you so much for being on here. How can those listening find you and get in touch with you? Where are you hanging out now?
100%. I got a lot of avenues. So Instagram, Stoked Communication is my handle. Go check out my content there. Linktree will take you to my website. It will take you to my Twitter account. It will take you to my podcast, the Stoked Communication Podcast on Spotify. I do have some YouTube videos for some previous courses I did under Xavi Donobedian, my name, on YouTube. And if you're interested in learning more about like the deep dives I do with health and the specific health coaching that I offer, you can check me out over at this really cool company called Whole Being. My Instagram is wholebeing_Xavi. And man, I feel like I probably have 4 more, but I'll leave it at that. It's enough.
I'll have you send the links over if you want, and I'll put all of the links of how you can get in contact with him in the description box below. But yes, even if you are interested in health coaching, he's your man. I don't know if you guys remember if you were following me, but when I hurt my back over a year and a half ago, I was like, Xavi, give me exercises. I need help. My hips were so tight, and I do the exercises to this day.
I love it.
Yeah. I love it. And no more pain. So thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on here. This was so powerful. I don't know about you guys listening, but at least it was powerful for me. And I just think that when we can better our communication with ourselves, with others, we better the world. And let's be real, you guys, the world needs better, effective communicators at this time. And we know that, right? Thank you so much for being on here. Is there any last words that you would like to share before you hop off?
Yeah, I would say that if there's anybody in the world who's going to save your ass, it's you. So stop looking for other people to do that. That is, I think, the primary dysfunction is that we are looking for the key to our salvation in everything, but A, ourselves, and B, our connection to God or our higher source. And if you can nail those 2, you have a much better chance of, kind of in biblical terms, salvation, or maybe in spiritual terms, liberation.
Yeah.
But either way, look to yourself.
Yeah, amen to that. Yep, so on key. Drop it in there. Well, thank you so much for being on here. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Peace.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with me and write an Apple iTunes review so I can keep the good stuff coming your way. If you aren't following me already, you can find me on Instagram at Tatiana_Kuto. I appreciate you so much and cannot wait to see you in the next episode. In the meantime, continue to shine bright and embrace your radiance.